York City Police Reform and Reinvention Collaborative Listening Session. I'm Chief Juanita Holmes, Chief of Collaborative Policing, and let me begin by thanking each and every one of you for your presence here this evening. It speaks volumes in your commitment and willingness to be heard. I will now introduce our dais for the evening, starting with the First Deputy Commissioner, Benjamin Tucker, Office of First Deputy Commissioner, Assistant Chief Matthew Pontillo, our co-sponsor attending virtually tonight, CEO of the Robin Hood Foundation, Mr. Wes Moore, Commanding Officer, Patrol Borough Manhattan South, Assistant Chief Stephen Hughes, CEO of Housing Bureau Manhattan, Inspector Karen Creighton, Mayor's Office of Community Affairs, Andrew Kunkis, and last and certainly not least, our facilitators for this evening, Manhattan Borough President, Ms. Gail Brewer, from the New York Peace Institute, Ms. Ayanna Behin, and Mr. Chris Daly. Chris Daly will be joining us via Zoom tonight. We will now hear from our Police Commissioner, the Honorable Dermot Shea.
Thank you for assisting in our work with City Hall and our critical partners to collaborate on police reform and reinvention. This process reinforces our mission to partner with the communities we serve to enforce the law, preserve peace, and ensure fairness. For the last nearly 7 years, the NYPD and the city have worked diligently to increase transparency and collaborate with our communities to enact significant reforms in training, discipline, enforcement, and use of force. Nothing is more important than our relationships with those we serve. It's the foundation for our commitment to public safety and quality of life in New York City. Our diverse viewpoints are what strengthen our ability to protect people, build strong relationships with those we serve, and enforce the law fairly and compassionately. Much has occurred in recent months to test the resiliency of our city. Throughout it all, the police department has been committed to public safety in partnership with New Yorkers. But we pledge to find deeper ways to get better. Today and throughout this process, please embrace this moment for reflection to speak honestly about what you believe works and what still needs improvement. I also ask that you please complete the feedback survey at the end of this event. We join the police department to help people, often in their most vulnerable time of need. We must never be complacent. Let us always embrace change as we've done throughout history and as our future demands. And let us go forward together. Thank you in advance for your help.
And although the Commissioner couldn't be here with us this evening, I can assure you he's here in spirit. Just a little bit about tonight's agenda. It's going to be about 2 hours in length. There will be a 90-minute community discussion. During the event, we ask that you keep your questions to about 2 minutes, questions and comments. We ask that you listen with compassion and understand that by no means are you obligated to ask any questions. One person will be asked to speak at a time, while remaining respectful of each other's experiences and opinions. And remember, it's okay to disagree. To our virtual world, if you're zoomed in, please use your chat feature for your input on comments and questions. Facebook Live, please use the comment box to input your questions or comments. After tonight's session, you'll be able to watch a full video of tonight's event, view materials and resources, and complete our survey at nyc.gov/NYPD/reforms. So why are we here this evening? This listening session is exactly how it reads. This is your platform to be heard, and this is your opportunity to tell your police department how we can restore your trust and your faith in us. The most important role you will have this evening is the role of an active participant. In order to create change, we need your recommendation on how your police department can best serve you. Let's talk about neighborhood policing. The New York City Police Department has been committed and has been ever evolving when it comes to community engagement. If you look back to 2015, we transitioned to neighborhood policing. We now have over 1,000 members in that position in every precinct in New York City. Stronger relationships played a strong role in precision policing. It helped us to focus on the small fraction of people committing the bulk of crime in New York City. Over the past decade, it has resulted in 49% fewer arrests being made and 83% fewer criminal court summonses being issued. Collaborative policing. Today, in 2020, we continue to evolve as an agency to improve our product for the public, starting with my office, Collaborative Policing. Our mission is to find innovative ways to serve the community, improve access to services, enhance community, government, and advocacy relationships, design creative crime reduction strategies, and increase non-enforcement options available to our officers. Also in 2020, under the leadership of Police Commissioner Shea, the NYPD has renewed its commitment to proactively reach young people and provide constructive engagement strategies, connecting them to resources and opportunities in their community. Understanding our communities is critical to serving our communities. So we encourage you to continue this dialogue by having your voice heard at your local community council and build-a-block meetings to assist us in hearing your voice more clearly. The department has developed a customer service initiative which will be implemented citywide to provide you with an exceptional experience when entering any of our facilities or interacting with any of our members. Additionally, as part of our program, we have developed a customer service survey, allowing you to share your experience so we can continue to improve. I have no doubt that with this continued improvement, we will encourage all the great minority communities in New York City to pursue a career with the NYPD. I will now turn this discussion over to Assistant Chief Matthew Pontello.
Thank you, Chief Holmes. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this evening and giving me a few moments to share a few thoughts with you. I'd like to touch on a few important issues. Over the last several years, the NYPD has undertaken a number of significant efforts at making improvements in the NYPD. And this is not to suggest that we think our work in these areas is done. I mean, to the contrary, we recognize that there is still a great deal of work to be done. And as a matter of fact, a lot of the initiatives and the improvements that I'm about to mention were done not only by the work of the men and women inside the NYPD, but with a great deal of input and collaboration from outside stakeholders and community. And this is all part of an ongoing process of continuous improvement. We recognize that we can always do better, and we always have to strive to do better. One area that's of critical importance is training, and I cannot overstate the value of training. And it's not just for new recruits being hired and coming into the police academy, but rather it is a career-long process of continuous improvement and professional development. Now, some of the skills that we teach our police officers are perishable. Just think, I think in my own experience, think in your own lives, maybe at one point there was something that you learned how to do or you knew something very, very well, but then you didn't really use that skill in a while. And then sometime later on in life, you went back to try to do something and you forgot how to do it. For myself, I'm always doing that. I'm always looking on YouTube for some tutorial video on how to, do something around the house. So we always need to learn and to refresh our skills. So with that in mind, we've expanded our commitment to training in the NYPD. When I first became a cop many years ago, we maybe had about 3 days of training annually. Fast forward to today, the typical police officer will spend about 10 days out of their command actually participating in some type of training. And this is very, very important. And in addition to the live classroom or scenario-based training, we've also given all of our police officers smartphones. Now, smartphones are not really unique or they're not new anymore, certainly, but in the hands of police officers, it's a very, very powerful tool because we now have the ability to push out information and messages to all of our police officers instantaneously, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that includes leveraging an online distance learning platform. And since we've begun this effort, we have delivered over 100,000 hours of training video to our police officers. And some of the key training courses we've delivered over the last few years include implicit bias, de-escalation, physical tactics, critical decision-making, and crisis intervention training. Now, perhaps the most critical decision a police officer can ever make is the decision to use force. And, given the nature of crime fighting and police work, at times it is necessary. However, through our policies, training, and oversight, it's our goal to make the use of force as infrequent as possible. And I think this chart on the screen, the blue bars, shows a very, very important evolution in this effort. So in 1972, there were 994 officer-involved shootings in New York City in that calendar year. And that was in a city with a population of about 7 million people and a much smaller police force. Fast forward to today, 2020, in a city of over 8.5 million with a much larger police force, we have only had 32 incidents in which an officer discharged a firearm, and only 18 of those were adversarial encounters or conflicts between a police officer and a civilian. In 2016, we revised our use of force policies, and the new policies now include comprehensive data collection and reporting, and the investigation of each use of force incident. And all of the use of force data going back to 2016 is available on the NYPD website. I don't think I need to tell anybody here that the use of stop, question, and frisk was a tactic that was often overused and led to a significant erosion of trust between the police and the community for many years. Over the last several years, as this chart demonstrates, the reduction in stop, question, and frisk in the city, we've been working very, very hard to reduce the number of stops and also to rebuild that trust. And that's why we're here tonight, and that's why we're having these sessions. It's part of engaging with the community and building trust. Interestingly, as stop, question, and frisk declined, major felony crime also continued to decline during that same time period. And to many, that seems somewhat counterintuitive, that as an enforcement activity would decline, so too would crime, but it did. And not only did stops decline, but arrests and summonses also declined during that same period. And I think this proves this idea of precision policing, that if we focus on, and certainly with community support and help, the very, very small number of people who are responsible for the vast majority of crime in the city, we can be very effective at identifying those offenders and reducing crime, instead of directing resources and enforcement at geographical areas where crime is occurring. Of course, discipline in the NYPD is of great concern to the public and even internally. And I think in part that's due to the fact that the disciplinary process in the police department for decades was shrouded in mystery, right? Nobody really got to see what happened or why. And that's because New York state law for decades prohibited the police department from releasing information about our employees and about discipline. In 2018, we commissioned a blue ribbon panel of experts to come in and look at discipline. And the good news is that they found, and they had access to all of our people and records, that the disciplinary system within the department was generally robust and fair. However, that it lacked transparency. And because of that lack of transparency, it completely undermined everything that was being done and that we were looking to accomplish. They made a series of 13 recommendations. We have adopted all of those recommendations to make the system even better. And then recently, state law was revised that now allows for the release of more information related to discipline and disciplinary records. We're currently in the process of building an online dashboard that will allow the public to go on and see these records and be able to review them for themselves. And recently, we also published draft penalty guidelines for misconduct. That was another area people have talked about for years, wanting to have a greater insight and knowing what to expect when there was some act of misconduct. And even internally, we found that that lack of transparency worked both ways, and our own people really don't even know what to expect. So these draft penalty guidelines went online at the end of August. Since then, we have received a good deal of public comment and feedback. We're now going through that comment, and we're making revisions to those guidelines, and we expect to have the guidelines revised and published by January. And one common theme through all my comments so far is transparency, right? Transparency can help build trust. It can give people much greater insight into what we do and how we do it. For years, we have put data on important topics like crime, stop, question, and frisk, summonses, use of force since 2016 online. However, the data, while it may have been good for researchers, it really was not good for the general public because the interface with the data was not user-friendly, it was not intuitive. It was all in tables and you had to download it. So we're now in the process of building these online dashboards. So it'll be much easier for the public to interface with our website, go online, and then be able to drill down on information about the police department. So we have a couple of dashboards already online. There's a crime dashboard that we call CompStat 2.0, and we also have these dashboards that you see on the screen. One deals with the demographics of the personnel in the NYPD, and then the other deals with hate crimes. And in the near future, like I said, you'll be seeing dashboards on discipline and also on use of force. The NYPD has the largest deployment of body-worn cameras in the country. We currently have more than 25,000 police officers and their supervisors in the field wearing body cameras. Since we began the rollout of body cameras in mid-2017, more than 13 million interactions between police officers and the public have been recorded. We're also adding about 130,000 videos each week. And, the body cameras proven very, very valuable for investigations, including the investigation and the resolution of civilian complaints. And we're also using the video for review by supervisors, so they can look at and assess the performance of their personnel. And then finally, body camera video from critical incidents, including officer-involved shootings, is released to the public. So the NYPD has a YouTube channel, and we make these videos available up on our YouTube channel. Now, just one caveat. There was a period of time between 2018 and 2019 when there was an injunction due to some litigation that prevented the department from publishing that video, but that court matter has been resolved, and since last September, we've been releasing the video again, and we've also started going backwards, publishing video from incidents that occurred during that time period. And of course, if we hope to deliver quality police service to the public, we need to look inward first and listen to and address the needs of our employees. One way that we're engaging our employees in the department is through a series of forums on race and social justice. These sessions have been very, very emotional. The feedback has been powerful, and these discussions are giving us ideas on ways we can make the department more inclusive and more equitable. We're also supporting the health needs of our employees more than ever before. And we're doing this to improve their resiliency, but also to help our employees address the stress and the trauma that can sometimes come with policing. And one way we're doing this was through the development of a peer support program. So I hope some of these highlights stimulate some questions and conversation tonight, and maybe answer some questions. Thank you all for your time and attention.
Thank you, Chief Pontello. So tonight is our 8th listening session. We completed all the listening sessions throughout New York City, culminating with Manhattan South, but by no means is this the end of the listening sessions. There are going to be a lot more listening sessions, a lot of other stakeholders involved, so it's important that you know that. In addition to some of the topics that came up during the past 7 meetings was diversity in the police department, training, accountability, discipline, and importantly, health and welfare of the members of the service that serve the public. So with that, I just would like to say that this has been one big whirlwind. We had to complete it in, I think, 2 weeks. We did 8 meetings or 3 weeks. But with that being said, it's important that you know every question posed here this evening may not be read, right? Your comments may not be heard, but everything's cataloged and taken into consideration with this police reform. So with that being said, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our facilitators for tonight's discussion, Ms. Borough President Gail Brewer, Ms. Ayanna Behin, and our virtual facilitators, Mr. Chris Daly and Mr. Westmore.
Good evening, everybody. My name's Ayanna Behin, and I'm with the New York Peace Institute. We provide mediation and conflict resolution services to New Yorkers and facilitation services. And you can find out more about us at nypeace.org. And I'm happy to be joined by my colleague on Zoom, Chris Daly. Chris, can you unmute and say hello?
Yes, thank you, Ayanna. Hi, I'm Chris Daly. I work with Ayanna at New York Peace Institute. I'm on the Zoom, and I'm happy to be here to try to just read the chat and bring forth any questions that I see there. I'm here just in my capacity at New York Peace Institute to help with this conversation and bring people's voices to the forefront here so that questions can be heard.
I'm Gail Brewer, Manhattan Borough President, and I was told tonight I'm supposed to be an agitator, and I love that role. I'm really excited to be here. There are 12, I think, young people here tonight, and I look forward to hearing from them. And we also have our very illustrious Community Board 3 District Manager, Susan Stetzer. She just came from a discussion in the neighborhood on the block with the police department, so she's very expert, and she has a million questions, as she always does. Congratulations to everybody.
Thank you so much. So for those of you in the room and in the Zoom, this is the 8th of 8 of these events, and if you've been lucky enough to watch them all, you'll see that they all have a little bit of a different flavor because we're in different boroughs with different audience members, with different people on the dais. And tonight, as the borough president said, we're lucky enough to have a big group of young people in the room. If you are on Zoom and you are also a young person, a student, high school, middle school, elementary, identify yourself. We'll try to bring you into the conversation. Our job tonight is really to help elevate your voices to make sure that you're heard by the people at the department who have the power to make change. So really use your voice tonight to make sure that the issues that matter to you are heard. This isn't going to be your last opportunity, but it is the last of these 8 meetings. So we look forward to hearing what you have to say tonight, and I'm really excited to be here. So apparently we've got a feisty bunch on Zoom. There is a lot of conversation already happening there. So I'm going to reach out to our first person, Miriama James, to see, Miriama, do you have a question for the panel?
I do have a question, thank you. Yes, my name is Miriama James. I'm here as a private citizen tonight, but I am the co-chair of the Quality of Life Committee on Community Board 1. My question is, how does the NYPD expect people to be able to call, to dial 911, when they, as a union, as well as their sergeants union, have endorsed such a polarizing and divisive presidential candidate who self-identifies as a white nationalist and a fascist?
All right, does anybody want to take that question on? I think the question is, given that the police union has endorsed Donald Trump for president, as he is a self-avowed white nationalist, how can New Yorkers call on the police department to help them in their time of need?
Good evening, everyone. Ben Tucker. Thanks for the question, and also thank you all for being here for this session. We look forward to hearing your comments. So, with respect to the question, I think, this is a democracy, and our unions are independent of our policies and our practices for the most part because of their status as unions. And so they, unlike our members of the service, who have the right to believe what they believe who they want and support who they want, but they can't do so while they're on duty and exercising their personal rights to endorse anyone they choose. We had an incident just recently with an officer who we're now holding accountable, who made statements and endorsements while he was on duty in uniform, which is a prohibited conduct in the department. And so we have these rules. When it comes to people who need help, and people call us all the time, I'm not sure that someone would be reticent to call 911. Typically, you're calling 911 because you're having a problem that needs attention, and you believe that the police are the ones to solve that problem. And so my sense is that they would, nevertheless, notwithstanding their disagreement with the fact that the unions have endorsed a particular candidate, nevertheless, I would hope, dial 911, and we will respond accordingly. We don't judge. We don't make decisions based on your affiliation or your gender, your race, or any of those things. We respond when you call, you need help, and we'll come.
Just go vote. That's my answer to that question. Go vote.
All right, so two different answers. Go vote, and also I think the commissioner is saying that regardless of how some police members identify politically, they're sworn to protect all New Yorkers, and that's what they're going to do. So, you should definitely continue to call on them for help. Back in the Zoom, Dale Corvino. Dale Corvino.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, Dale.
Hi. How are you? I want to be transparent about who I am. I'm the co-chair of CB4's Transportation Planning Committee. And in my capacity, we've seen a couple of troubling patterns. The first is bias in the way our sidewalks and streets are policed. Bias which on the one hand disfavors cyclists. We've seen cyclist crash victims repeatedly blamed without any evidence by attending officers. And it seems that officers from local precincts are also reluctant to involve the collision unit. The other evident bias disfavors people of color, particularly in pedestrian interactions. There's a very recent example of mine, a colleague of mine, a person of color, constantly being stopped on his own block where he lives, West 20th Street, which was one of the barricaded streets, as he was coming and going while his white neighbors were never stopped. This is just one recent example. So I'd like to know how you address the current ingrained bias that's on the street today. I also have questions about the general disregard I've seen for civilian oversight and the rules that we all have to live by in the city. We've seen extensive placard abuse, parking violations. There was a long-term habit of Midtown South Precinct parking police vehicles in active turn and travel lanes on 9th Avenue. Precinct block sidewalk obstructions. caused by hidden parking. Police vehicles obstructing bike lanes.
Dale,
I get it. There's not enough parking.
We got
I have
the
more
questions.
questions, and I'll just finish this one up. I get it. There's not enough parking for the massive fleet of official vehicles, personal vehicles, and everyone's brother's personal vehicles. And it seems evident that we need more designated parking for
Thank
police
you.
vehicles, but maybe we need fewer vehicles as well as part of the answer.
Thank you so much,
I
Dale.
have many more
I want to
questions
make sure,
I'd like to
I'm sure
bring
you
up.
do have lots of other questions. And if you wouldn't mind putting them in the chat so that we can get more voices in the room, but I want to make sure that we get some
I put all of
answers.
my questions in the chat, including questions about the recent comments about the head of the PBA and the SBA.
Perfect.
And I would really like those addressed.
Thank you. All right, so to the questions that we just heard were bias in policing against cyclists, bias in policing against people of color, traffic, and police parking in Manhattan South.
Sure. Good evening, everybody. I'm Chief Steve Hughes. I'm the Borough Commander for Manhattan South. I think they started off first with about traffic enforcement, bicycle enforcement in the bike lanes and the collisions. We did expand our definition with the collision investigation squad when they come out, and we take a person that's struck by a bicyclist very seriously, the similar way if they were struck by a vehicle. So we have a set criteria. The officer on the scene will call the sergeant to the location. They'll look at the injuries, the severity. Generally, if they're going in a hospital in serious condition, we're going to call our highway unit, and we're going to do a thorough investigation of that. You mentioned West 20th Street, about the closures that we had on our block. West 20th is where the location of the 10th precinct. It's between 7th and 8th Avenue. We did, since George Floyd's incident, a lot of demonstrations in the city. They generally occur nightly. We do have barriers on each of the precinct blocks based on what happened around the country to the different police facilities. So we do security there. Sometimes the barriers are left overnight and they do block the sidewalk. I called each of the precinct COs, and each day we make sure the barriers, the sidewalks are open so people don't have to walk in the street. Especially it started with the school year. When the schools open, a lot of complaints with the 13th precinct that were near schools. So I apologize for that. We did correct that when we saw that became an issue. I think he was talking about bias in stops. Generally, if the violation deserved the person's stop. If you have a specific situation you're talking about, then you could call the precinct, call 911, or call the Civilian Complaint Review Board, and we'll investigate that.
Okay, thank you very much.
If it's okay with you, I'm going to call on Mamadou over here, one of the amazing young people here tonight, both to whatever question you would like, and in addition, Dale from Community Board 4, which is in Chelsea and Hell's Kitchen, asked about bias and his situation in policing, and you may want to add to that, whatever you want, sir. And we're delighted that you're here tonight.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Mamadou Sissoko. In regards to NYPD training, is the NYPD planning on implementing more hand-to-hand training such as Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which is proven to actually help officers de-escalate situations through better effective restraint techniques? Do you guys have any plans on changing the way that you strategize your trainings to help officers de-escalate situations in the public?
Thank you, Marcus. So your question is about de-escalation and training. Are you training officers to de-escalate and in particular use Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and other forms of de-escalation?
Thank you. Great question. De-escalation is an important part of our training currently. We began that 2015, 2016, and it continues to be an important part of both in-service training and recruit training. The particular type of jiu-jitsu, or also we've heard about like police judo, we do not teach those specifically, but we do teach some of those techniques. So right now, several months ago, we began a refresher training on physical tactics, how to take somebody into custody, how to use arm bars and leg techniques and takedown techniques to get somebody into custody, using leverage is common in judo and jiu-jitsu. So we are teaching that. Recently, we had to suspend that training temporarily because of an increase in COVID cases, because it is 8 hours of hands-on practical skills on the mat in small groups with instructors. Very, very important, we agree. Also in the spring, we began in each borough a series of tactical training courses where people would come in for 2 hours at a time, come off patrol, come in, attend 2 hours of tactical training, go through some drills, some scenario-based exercises, then go back out, and then we'd bring in 2 more people. So the idea was to rotate people who are on patrol constantly through these training classes so that in smaller, shorter sessions, so we could do it more frequently to keep re-emphasizing and building those skills. Again, unfortunately, because of COVID and the small environment that we were operating in and the hands-on, close personal contact nature of that training, we had to delay that training as well. So we're hoping that by the beginning of next year or shortly thereafter, we're able to get that training back up and running. But no, you're absolutely right. Those tactical skills, those hands-on skills, using those judo-like techniques, very, very important, and we're committed to it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. If you're in the room and you have filled out your comment card, I'm going to ask you to raise your hand so that Alan can pick up your cards from you and we can start getting more questions from the room. In the meantime, we're going to go back to Zoom. I'm going to ask Ben Weinberg if you're available to unmute yourself, and then check in with Chris to see what she's seeing in the chat.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Ben Weinberg. My question is about the CCRB NYPD relations, of course, the Civilian Complaint Review Board, so it's more focused on accountability. So my question is, the CCRB has been impeded in its efforts to hold police officers accountable for alleged wrongdoing, mostly because of delays by the NYPD in providing videotapes from body-worn cameras and other relevant documents. Sorry. And as well as because of editing and redactions of these vital sources of evidence. Now, the NYPD attempts to justify this conduct because of privacy concerns that are stemming from laws that limit dissemination of certain information by law enforcement agencies. My question is, will the commissioner or the department leadership here in the room would support legislation that makes it clear that the CCRB is entitled to receive evidence from the NYPD, just like district attorneys?
Gotcha. Okay. So just to be clear, your question, which we're going to, make sure is on this record, is about potential legislation related to the Civilian Complaint Review Board and the kind of evidence that it gathers and it has access to. Yep. Okay. Okay, great. So that's going to be on the record, and I think that you all can take that under advisement. Chris, let me just check in with you to see what's going on.
Yes, thank you, Ayanna. So I'm here monitoring the chat on the Zoom, and there are a bunch of different questions here. A couple that keep coming up I just want to highlight right now. One is a question following up on the training question, which is specifically about mental illness training, some commentary on that. Another one is about drag racing and running red lights and safety issues that are common concerns to all New Yorkers and the response to that. Another topic that really is coming up quite a bit, especially in the beginning, was masks and NYPD compliance with wearing masks, and some commentary on that. And the last one I'm just going to surface right now is about overall integrity on the force. And basically, if there's willingness to commit minor infractions with the parking placard, then is that not a slippery slope that something else could happen as well? So those are the 4 I want to bring up from the chat right now.
Thank you. All right, so I think that, these have come up in other forums, and I think it's worthwhile if somebody can address some of them. We were talking about training and support for officers, especially mental health support. I don't know if that's something that one of you wants to address, or kind of this idea of a slippery slope where if officers are allowed to flout some rules and regulations, then, you know, they may be emboldened to flout others. And if, you know, that first it's a parking violation and then it gets steeper from there. So does anybody want to address those? Chief, thank you. All right, both.
So just in terms of officers who don't follow our rules and regulations, they're on the books, they're very clear. Officers are well aware of what they can do and what they cannot do. And so it's very simple. If officers are violating the rules in the patrol guide with respect to the abuse of their authority through the use of placards or things like that, we'll hold them accountable. And if we receive complaints from many people, from the public who may be concerned about that, we'll act on those. Any complaints we receive, we act on them.
It's harder though, because as you know, limited staff. So that's a good answer, sir. But I think that it's an ongoing issue for the community boards. Is there anything more in the future that might be done about placards? And the other issue we get are the masks. Everyone here is wearing a mask, but officers don't. And I know it's hard, but is there any way we could make that even clearer, both placards and masks, even though I know it's not supposed to be, but it is? How can we do more on those two topics?
Well, I think we are doing more. With respect to masks in particular, we've made it pretty clear what the expectation is. Officers are supposed to have those masks on when they're out there, unless there's some reasonable explanation for why they're not wearing the masks. And they are. We all wear the masks. Sometimes they're uncomfortable. But when you're out there doing your job as a police officer, the expectation is you wear them. If you have to take a break from wearing the mask, then you step away, isolate yourself, and you can take it off and put it back on when you're back in the public view doing your job. So that's the expectation.
Thank you, Commissioner.
And we hold people accountable.
Thanks, Commissioner.
Okay.
Chief, did you want to add anything to that?
I often hear the parking placard come up, and I know it's tough. I know it's tough on the community, and I know it's tough on the officers that just want to come to work, park, and do their job, and they met with the parking challenges. And I remember Melinda Katz in Queens, when I was the borough commander there, making specific provisions when she had to redevelop a particular street to ensure that there was some parking there for the officers. So I know it is tough. I'm not making excuses. You know, the bottom line is, no, you shouldn't park there. You definitely shouldn't block crosswalks or park in bus lanes or handicap spots. That's a no-no. So, but as far as the masks are concerned, I think you're starting to see, yes, in the beginning, I know it was a lot of that, officers not wearing a mask. That's something pushed every day. And for those of you who don't know, I was recently assigned as Chief of Patrol today, and the new Chief of Patrol for New York City Police Department. It's something that I encourage and always push. And I always say to the community, you know, no officer should be above the rules and regulations, and it's protecting themselves as well as protecting others. So that's all I wanted to add.
Thanks, Chief, and congratulations on the new assignment as Chief of Patrol. I'm going to read this Facebook live comment by Stephen Stone. It says, do you have any written mandated training guidelines, and if so, are you able to share them with the public? Written mandated training guidelines. I think this can be a yes or no.
So, yes, all of our training materials, have been developed sometimes in consultation with key stakeholders and subject matter experts. But we do have a defined curriculum for Police Academy, and then other specialty courses like crisis intervention training. There is a curriculum for that. Some of our training material is currently available online. We're looking at making more of it available online as well.
Great. Thank you so much. All right, so back to Zoom, and then we're going to come back in the room, and so maybe I'll get one of those cards. Okay. So back to Zoom. I think we're going to go with David Lutzer. David Lutzer, can you unmute yourself?
Yes, you've answered my question about masks, and that's been a major concern. I'm glad that you're doing, because so many people were not wearing masks. And the other question, now this may not be police, it may be the mayor, but enforcing the people who do not abide by the COVID-19 guidelines, like, wearing masks or, maybe it's the mayor, I don't know, I think leaflets are given out. It's not trying to be political, but I think the governor has a stronger, way of doing this, just that the police enforce it. A lot of people flout it, not a lot, but enough people flout it. And lastly, and this is old history, but way back in July, I just did not appreciate when I believe the police force was sent with the protesters while at my doorstep. There was a lot of violence, and the police maybe it was a police agenda that people just attacked and destroyed a lot of property, and the police were somewhere else. I know it's old news. I just don't want it happening again. Those are my 3 things. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much. I don't know if you want to talk about protesting, but also this seems like violence and looting, which is obviously different from protesting. I don't know if you all want to address it. Yes? Thank you.
I want to say that during all of that, this gentleman was very responsive. Thank you, Chief.
Thanks, Gail. Yeah, this is, like I mentioned earlier, since May with the George Floyd incident, it's been a tough time in the city with the protest. Manhattan South, that's generally our specialty over the years. We have about 2,000 special events that we do. We have the July 4th, New Year's Eve, the Thanksgiving Day Parade, the Ethnic Parade, St. Patrick's, Puerto Rican Day, where we deal with large crowds. We have the United Nations, where we have a lot of political protests. We deal with labor protests each day. Environmental causes. If you got a cause and you want to protest, you come into New York City, and that's where we go. But generally, we have, on our protests previously, people come to us. We have the leaders, we have the organizers. We work out what time they want to start, what time they want to end, how many people they have, do they need a sound device, do they need a stage set up. And we work with that. We coordinate with the other city agencies. Do they need sanitation? Do they need a parks permit? Do they need a sound permit? So we're very good with doing that, and we ask people to come in to Manhattan South, go into your local precinct if you want to protest, and schedule a protest. Generally, the protests are during the day. What we've seen in the last few months, since May, is a lot of the protests, there's no leader, there's no organization that comes forward. We don't usually get a time when they want to start. We don't get a number of people. It makes it very difficult for us to plan for that and put the right police resources at those locations. What we're finding is a lot of the protest groups now like to go to parks, generally Foley Square, Union Square, Washington Square Park, up at Columbus Circle, Duffy Square, Bryant Park. So we monitor the parks, and that's generally how we pick up a lot of times when protests happen, when people start gathering. Generally very easy to spot with the signs, and then we deploy officers to those locations. So regarding some of the protests that have gotten out of line, generally when we're there, we're able to provide security during the protests for both the protesters and for the residents, the workers, and the visitors that come into the city. So it's about getting cooperation, it's about getting respect. We saw a couple of nights ago in Brooklyn, not a lot of respect for the people that were in restaurants or the businesses along that. We had an incident on September 4th in Manhattan, and of course we had the incidents in Soho and Midtown. So it's something we're preparing for. We have the national election coming up. Similar to what we do for January 1st and the other big events, we're going to have a pretty sizable police deployment out those days. We do our counterterrorism measures because it's a holiday. We've seen events that are going around the world, so there'll be a larger police presence out there. We ask everybody to respect everybody else's right to come out, to vote, and then to assemble, peacefully assemble, and that's what we ask people to do.
I protested at all those parks, but peacefully.
Thank you.
Thank you. In person, Jay Wang.
He's very fabulous.
Okay. Thanks, Jay.
Good evening. My name is Jay Wang. One of my questions that I put on the card was, I know the YCO program has been released recently. What are the goals and mission of the YCO program in regards to the youth?
So the question was about the YCO program. Thanks, Chief.
So yes, the YCO program, the youth coordinating. So that's actually the intentions of that program is to reach all youths in New York City. We recently assigned, or I should say reassigned to that position, 330 officers. And as you know, we got off with the training initiating in the academy, and then we were met with COVID and had to kind of put that on the back burner. What that's designed to do is to engage the youth. I think I spoke about that earlier. We're looking and recommitted to reaching out to all youths, not just youth that may interact with the police on occasions, but just to give them options and opportunities, give them something to do. We were looking to employ some of the youth this summer, and by employing them, they were going to be paid, and while being paid, they will be met with whatever interest they had, whether it was aviation, different trades like electricians were willing to speak to them. We had a whole array of people lined up to actually come and participate in those programs. So with that being said, hopefully we'll be well on our way once we get some sort of control on COVID and reestablishing that program.
I have two questions. So I think that program got cut, Chief, and I hope it gets reinstated because people who were involved from NYPD loved it in addition to the young people. So how are we going to reinvigorate it with funding? And second, how can people like Jay and Mahmoud and Brian over here, how can they be involved in the future with the YCOs?
Oh, they can just walk into the precinct. YCOs are assigned to every precinct in New York City. So just walk into your local precinct and ask who are the YCOs assigned there.
Okay. What about funding for the program that involved young people?
We had funding from the Police Foundation, which is really a strong backing. We had funding from HIDA. Many of you don't know, but when we confiscate money or cars and homes from people doing the wrong thing, that money gets reallocated, and we were able to get some of those funds through Chauncey Parker, who's assigned, he's actually Deputy Commissioner of Community Partnerships, and put that money back into the communities to better serve the youth.
We just need more.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Back in Zoom, I'm going to see if Shane King is still there and then check in with Chris to see what she's seeing. Shane King.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for this forum. I'll be very quick with my questions. The first question is if someone could just please give more details in regards to implicit bias training, that would be awesome. Can someone talk in regards to how the police can participate more? I know they're already doing so, but can they participate more in the community with activities / volunteer work? And can that become a significant role in their responsibilities and job description? And then also, can someone talk about the services that they provide for young folks so that we can continue to find ways to build community with our young people? Those are my questions, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much. All right, so that question was about, I think you addressed some of the young people, the YCOs, but the other part of that question was the implicit bias training, which you talked a little bit about. Maybe you could give a little bit more details and let us know if there are ways that officers who want that training can ask for it, and are there ways for a community to support it?
Yeah, great question. So over about 2 years, we delivered a full-day implicit bias training to every uniformed member of the NYPD. So from police officer right up through the police commissioner, everybody attended. And it's an 8-hour session. It's an interactive course. A lot of discussion. There's discussion about some research, and it really challenges people to look inward and identify some of the preconceived notions that all of us have. And it's not necessarily just about race. It could be about anything. And it recognizes how the human brain operates, right? Where the human brain takes pieces of information, puts it together, and draws a conclusion very, very rapidly. And sometimes those conclusions are flawed, and it's something that our brain does without us even thinking about it. But understanding how the brain works, understanding what some of those triggers are, understanding how we've been conditioned by our own life experience to react certain way to certain stimuli is the first step in raising awareness about implicit bias and how it affects our decision making. So the training course that we delivered was designed to be delivered to people by their rank and type of assignment. So for example, police officers and detectives received one version of the course, and it was done in small groups, no bigger than 30, with a facilitator. And it really focused on, you know, their role in the organization and their role dealing with the public. Supervisors got a different version of the course, dealt with some of those same implicit bias issues, but also dealt specifically with the individual in their role as a supervisor and what they needed to do, what they needed to be able to recognize, and how they should be leading and mentoring their subordinates. And then there was a managerial version of the course as well. So the elements of both of those two programs, plus an additional layer for the executive to think about how we manage the organization, how we manage our people with the awareness of the impact of implicit bias. So that's been completed. We also partnered with independent organizations, University of Cincinnati, the International Association of Chiefs of Police, and some researchers from SUNY Albany to take a look at the impact of the program. And the great news was almost 75% of the people who took the course recognized how it impacts them, and it raised their awareness. So it's the beginning of giving them the tools to be able to address this going forward. We did a version that also included community, police executives and community members together. Those were day-and-a-half long sessions, and those were very effective as well. Right now, we've begun a series of implicit bias training courses for our almost 20,000 civilian employees, and we're in the process now of working on a refresher training. You know, we recognize it's not a one and done. It's the kind of thing that we need to bring people back periodically and give them a refresher course. So that's not designed yet, but that'll be coming in the future.
I just want to pick up on the young people. I know, Chief Holmes, you talked about walking into a precinct. That's kind of scary sometimes. So I just want to have, if any of the young people here want to jump in, but I think you need to do a little bit more. We talked last night about the precinct council meetings. I love the heads of the precinct council, but those are the most boring meetings under the universe. So how do we work with young people in a different way?
And I agree. So, you know, naturally we have been re-envisioning community meetings. And what do I mean by that? Looking at them, trying to increase the attendance, trying to get away from the same individuals attending the meeting all the time. In addition to that, how do we best deliver those meetings? Maybe such as this evening, we have the Facebook Live, we have Zoom. So we want to reach more people, and we realize people have obligations, whether it's children, whether they just tired and don't feel like coming out and attending a meeting. That is definitely, always has been, and definitely open to young people. It's important that they participate. But walking into a precinct, I understand what you're saying, it can be scary. Most people don't call the police unless you need them for something. Most people don't even interact with the police unless it's a crime committed against them or they lost some property. So that's completely understood. That's why we have implemented this customer service initiative. It's important when you walk into your precinct that you're greeted in a timely fashion, right? That you're greeted with the person have a smile on their face, they want to help you, you know, they're at work, and that your needs that you came in for are met. Or at least you're pointed in the right direction. So I can assure you, you will see a change in why. I shouldn't say change, because a change is an indication that every precinct is the same or everybody's having bad experiences, which is not the case. But one bad experience is one too many. So that's why we put this initiative in place, and hopefully it'll quell some of those concerns.
A shift in culture. I appreciate it. I know, Commissioner, that you wanted to say something on this point two?
Just on the issue of young people and their, whether they're willing or not to come into station houses. Just let me just say that, you know, the outreach on young people, I mean, we've ramped it up in this administration, but for years, decades, we've been very, very, very connected to young people, and young people through our youth councils, through our Explorer program. We have some of our cadets in the room. Young people are very engaged with us. We have another program called Options, where we're providing, you know, through virtual reality programs, and then we have one called Learn to Earn, where young people are very engaged with finance, with understanding community engagement, with various subject areas that are, you know, get them and put them in a position where they're able to earn through an internship, earn dollars during the summer months when they're out of school. So there are a variety of ways. So you'd be amazed. I mean, we have close to 4,000, trying to reach 5,000 at any given moment, explorers. Our youth councils are very large, and they're active. We have a number of posts. So when it comes to outreach and youth engagement, through our schools, through our school safety agents, and a whole variety of others, there are any number of ways that you can become involved and be engaged. I met with a group of youngsters today who are in one police plaza, taking a workshop on resume writing and speaking, and, you know, getting information that will allow them to, particularly for those in high school, who may be close to graduating and so forth. So
thank you so
just
much.
Important.
So I've got a growing stack of cards from Zoom and in person and Facebook. So I'm going to ask us all to keep our remarks a little bit briefer, because I want to make sure we get as many voices in the room as possible. So just following up on the conversation that you all were having, I want to make sure in the record is Thomas Roth's point, and Thomas said, how can NYPD effectively reach out to the youth and build a better community and outreach them? Exactly what you're talking about, but I just want to make sure it's on the record that it continues to come up from the young people in this space. Okay, Chris, I want to check in with you.
Yes, thanks, Ayanna. So a lot going on in the chat, and it seems like the overall theme of what I'm seeing on the chat is that people want to feel safe, and they want to feel as though they can trust the police. And so there are many different subcategories with these two big topics of wanting to feel safe in their homes and neighborhoods and having this trust. And within that, there were a bunch of different questions, again, about the protests, about how they were treated differently in the summer versus in the fall. Also a question about facial recognition, and a question about basic communication. So training regarding basic communication of how to bring up these topics to NYPD, and, you know, how to really dialogue with NYPD.
Crucial questions, right? How to rebuild trust that seems to have been broken, and how to create ongoing dialogue like the one that we're having tonight, but also others. So I don't know if anybody wants to answer those or just keep them in the record for now. Okay, I think we're going to keep them in the record for now. Thanks so much, Chris, for highlighting those. Also in the room, I think, we have Nariam Burgess. There you go.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Narayan. I'm an explorer for the 9th Precinct in Lower East Side, Manhattan. My question for the NYPD is, how does the NYPD feel about possibly having a president who doesn't support them or law and order, and how could that affect the department?
That was a little tough to understand through your mask. Do you mind asking that again? I'm so sorry.
Apologies.
That's okay. Go for it.
How does the NYPD feel about possibly having a president who doesn't support them or law and order, and how can that affect the department?
Okay. So I guess the question is, you know, how does the leadership in the federal level, the president, you know, who that person is, affect the morale or the mission of the NYPD if you feel that that person doesn't support the organization. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Pretty much policing in New York City, it's really on a local level. It's down to the neighborhood. It's about that officer meeting somebody. So the politics, the national politics, really doesn't have a play too much into what we do on the street. And you're right, it just goes back to the question about building trust. We've been seeing it, you mentioned the protest again. And that's part of policing. We have to be impartial. We don't take sides at protest. We want to be neutral. Generally, we have a couple of guidelines. We want to give you half the sidewalk or half the street. We reserve the other part of the street for the people that are in the neighborhood. Sight and sound. When someone protests, if they don't like against a facility or building or where somebody's staying, we have to give them sight and sound to that person or to that building. So generally, the rule's the same for everybody. Likewise, when we do enforcement, it's the same. If you're out there protesting peacefully, there's no problem with the police. We just provide safety and security for you. But if you injure somebody or you commit property damage, you'll be arrested. The policy in the police department is we don't give people space for people to vent where they're committing criminal acts. We have to take action to stop those criminal acts from taking place. And it doesn't matter what type of protest it is, what type of demonstration, what type of event. If there are criminal acts taking place, we're obligated as police officers to take action. So we treat everybody fairly. I've been to, like I mentioned before, thousands of protests for thousands of different reasons. Everybody gets treated the same. Half the sidewalk, half the roadway, sight and sound in the location. If you're orderly, peaceful, we'll facilitate you getting from point A to point B, but we ask your cooperation for that.
Thank you. Okay, back to Zoom. Taylor Banning. Taylor?
Hi, good evening. Thank you. I'm going to keep it short. My concerns are about the aggression towards civilians downtown this summer while protesting. I did witness, and it has been substantiated, that the NYPD was aggressive towards protests for racial justice. It was really upsetting to watch. And bias and racism within the NYPD is prevalent and dangerous, and harm has been done to far too many people, and accountability has not been maintained. And so I hope that by holding these meetings, you do hear that many, many people feel hurt, and people need to be held accountable. The NYPD needs to be held accountable. The harm that's been done and any future harm needs to be held accountable. Thank you.
Thank you, Taylor. Sorry, Yvette. So that raises a point that I think Chris spoke to, that's showing up in the chat and on Zoom and some of the other comments that have been raised, and that's about accountability, right? We talked a little bit about protests, and you've explained kind of how the police try to work with the community in protests usually, but what happens in situations where that doesn't go according to plan? Chief.
So thank you for the question. And the participants seem to feel sound very, very disturbed by what her experience may have been. So this was a protest, right, that we have I've been here over 30 years, never been met with before. And we've been met with many protests, Crown Heights, different areas. But this was something that we've never seen before. So one thing I can say about NYPD, we take a look at what we did right, but we also take a look at what we could have done better. And that's something that we did. So when you're met with challenges of that nature, right, inexcusable for anyone doing anything that they shouldn't be doing, but if you're, with the officers just giving them the benefit of the doubt that they reacted the way they normally react. If they see someone doing something that they perceive to be not within the law, they arrested them, not realizing that protests are allowed, but peaceful protests are allowed, right? With that being said, we ended up retraining probably almost 11,000 members of the Department in Disorder Control, right? And those are things that when I was a young cop, we did every week there were mobilizations to teach us how to respond to demonstrations. And we kind of got away from that because we created these other unique task force that were tasked with responding to particular incidents, particular protests, but nothing of the magnitude that we were met with this summer. So I can say with the surety that we have a more structured response. We're increasing training, and we will continue to train, and people will be allowed to protest peacefully, right? They have that right. But with that being said, anything destructive in nature regarding property or injury to a person, then yes, we do have to take some action. And I think the majority of the public that's out there protesting peacefully would want to see that, because a lot of the public brought to our attention people that had ill intentions during those demonstrations. So with that being said, I apologize to our caller because she really seemed shooken up by it, but I can assure you that our response will be better in nature.
So you're working on it, you've learned from past mistakes, and I just want to circle back to the issue of accountability for the officers who, I don't know, misstepped.
No, we had officers that did things that never should have been done. That's not in alignment with what we stand for as an agency. And they were dealt with and dealt with pretty swiftly.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Did you want to say anything? No, I just want to say
Well, in regards...
Ayanna, could you repeat that question for the Zoom, because we can't hear it on the Zoom?
Absolutely.
Okay, we don't have any.
So the question was, the borough president was reaching out to an audience member, one of the youth, and asking him if he had a question. And he's been given the microphone. I think he's going to ask a question about communication and about, expanding the communication between the officers and youth.
Well, in regards to officers and the youth, I'm an explorer of the 5th Precinct, Manhattan South, and cops do a lot of good jobs when it comes to PAL, doing sports with kids. It takes two to tango. So in regards to that, you need the community to be 50%, you need officers to be 50% as well. I feel like the officers are doing a great job when it comes to trying to engage the community, engage the youth, engage people as well. But like I said, it's only going to work if people want to work with them as well.
Thank you. So the response was really, it was really a statement about how officers, this particular young man's experience working with officers in the Explorers program, and feeling like, officers have to be met halfway with the youth. Right? Is that about right? Sort of. What'd I miss? Hang on a second. Now you're getting a mic back.
I'm sorry. It doesn't necessarily have to be halfway, but there does need to be a standing point where both can agree of what should be done and who is going to help with the situation. Because if one disagrees, but they don't want to find a way to agree, it's never going to work out.
Gotcha. So that you have to be willing to try to work together. I hear that.
I'm a Mamadou fan, just so you know.
Thank you. So I'm just doing a quick time check. It's 8:15. We have about 45 minutes left. I want to make sure that we're hearing from as many people as possible, that we're hearing solution ideas as well. I got one from Lewis Cohen, who is a former police officer in Williamsburg in 1973 to 1979. And he said he spent part of each day knocking on doors and trying to get to know the community. And even if he knocked on 50 doors a day and got 4 responses, he could hear from the community members what was most pressing to them, and then he would show up there for them, and that helped build that relationship. So thank you, Mr. Cohen. Okay. Also on Facebook, Karen Patton Hawkshurst wants to say, with defund taking NYPD off of homeless shelters, what are we left to do with these people who are urinating, defecating, and shooting up in the streets? So this is a question about, homelessness. well, not just homelessness, but homeless people who don't have a place to take care of their business.
Right. With 311, that's probably the number 3 complaint. We have noise and traffic, and then the homeless conditions that are in Manhattan. As you know, since COVID, a lot of the hotels have been utilized for COVID patients, where people that are homeless, to separate them and give them space. So there's been an influx in Manhattan South of the homeless conditions. So generally, the homeless is, we're working now with the Department of Homeless Services since the realignment of the police department. So they're the lead agency. So we've been receiving, DHS will have the homeless complaints, the 311 calls go to them now, and then they reach back out through us for their support. We've done homeless operations with DHS where we support them as we go around lower Manhattan at different times of the day and operations to do that. Generally, what we have here, if you have a complaint where there's a shelter, please call the precinct in Manhattan South. One thing that we're fortunate in New York City is that we have a law that prevents a shelter from being built on a street. You know, if you look at Seattle, San Francisco, or LA, someone can pitch a tent on a street. That's prohibited in New York City. So if you do have a shelter, we'd like to respond out to that. And this way, that will help to correct the condition. But what I do see in New York City is we have a lot of scaffolding. I think that's where a lot of the homeless try to make encampments. All right, so, and that's generally where we work with DHS. So if you have, that really falls under DHS, so if you have somebody under a scaffolding, please call DHS. If they need our assistance, then we'll respond with DHS.
I just want to add, and I know Susan Setzer knows this, but as a borough president, each community board where this is a challenge, we're going to try to have constant meetings with those who work with the street homeless and those who are working with those in the hotels, and try to work with the district managers to have a conversation with, because it's not just NYPD, it's not just Department of Homeless Services, there are other agencies involved, and we're going to try to do all of those on a weekly basis.
Thank you. And that kind of also goes to the fact that the police are being asked to do so many things that are outside of, you know, their normal purview, homelessness, that their agencies to deal with that, people who are mentally ill, et cetera, et cetera. In the room, I'm going to ask Alan Silverstein and then Susan. I'm sorry, I will find your card, but in the meantime, Alan and then Susan, and then we'll go back to Zoom.
Oh, okay, take my mask off. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and first let me say congratulations to the new Chief Holmes, Chief of Patrol. We wish you all the best of luck in your new position, and you will have all the support that you need to be very, very successful. I want to thank everyone for putting this wonderful forum together. It's the last one of this touring, which I'm sure there'll be more, hopefully, and Gail Brewer, it's good to see you in the audience as well. Thank you. I've listened to all 7 meetings so far, but prior to that, I had the ability to go to all, not all, but 8 out of the 17 touring meetings that Chief Pichardo put together, and we hit approximately 40 precincts in all 5 boroughs. That being said, I took very, very, very copious notes and listened to all the different communities. I'm a community partner myself, and I wanted to learn what is really happening in New York City, because every single sector in every single precinct is different completely from one another. And we have to be able to understand how it works, not only from policing, but as a business. I've put a plan together where I believe that if I'm able to have an audience with the bosses, that with the NCOs and the community partners, if you do the numbers, we have approximately 75 precincts in the NYPD throughout New York City. In each precinct, we have approximately 4 sectors. In each sector, we have 2 NCOs and 2 community partners that volunteer their time and effort into this. That equates to approximately 600 civilian volunteers right in front of us, right in front of our nose at the doorstep that we could usurp and pull from. I believe that if we can put what we have together, which is Chief Harrison's vision of having the NCO program, which is the old CPOP program. Now, bear in mind, I've listened to many of the meetings, I've gone to many of them, and I've heard all the issues that everybody has spoken about. And frankly, it's impossible for the people that go to the academy, that graduate as police officers, to be trained and to handle every single social issue and criminal issue out there. There's just not enough of us. With that, here is my question.
Okay.
Okay? Is there a way, and can there be a way, that we can get the community partners involved in helping get our communities back together again and bring the trust and faith with our communities back with the NYPD, working with our NCOs, working with multiple commands, working with the precincts that we know, and build that, have that as a foundation, and actually run it as a real business, and from the bottom up, and work together as a team, and there's no reason why we can't.
Chris.
I'm sorry to interrupt. It's Chris, and I very much apologize to interrupt, but from my end, I'm monitoring the Zoom chat, and this is, if we could just get to maybe the question right now, because there are many more questions that people are very excited to ask.
Okay, so the question was again, please, if there is a way that we could get, how can we get the community partners involved?
Gotcha.
To get the communities back together.
All right, thank you. I think that's something to definitely contemplate. I don't know if we're going to have an answer right now, but it's a suggestion for moving forward, is getting the community partners. Oh, sorry, Chief, yes.
I'll make a quick comment regarding that. So we're actually in a process, I think, of hiring community ambassadors. I think one for each borough. I don't know if that's been completed yet. Also, we're looking at bringing the community partners, right? Because back in 2014, when Commissioner Bratton came on board, we kind of formalized the community partner position. With that being said, you were going into the police academy, talking to the recruits. When they got out, you were there to greet them and show them through the neighborhood and introduce them to people. Well, fast forward, NCO philosophy, right? But with that being said, what we're seeing now that we're looking at doing is bringing community members back into the police academy. The reason we're having this listening session is because we can't create a crime reduction strategy and a process to improve the quality of life without your commitment to work with us. We can't do it. You know, I often speak about this 9 million people in the city at any given time. When tourism was at its height or people coming into work, it was more than that. And this city is about 30-something square miles, whatever it is. And 40% of the people in New York State live here. We have 36,000, I think we're down to 35,000 members of the service. If the majority of people in New York City weren't good law-abiding citizens, we wouldn't be able to police this city. But also, we still need your input, right? What can we be doing better? Point us in the right direction. So to make it a long response short, that is something we are definitely looking at and working towards.
Thank you, Chief. All right, so I think here's what we're going to do. We're going to take one more Zoom question and answer it, and then every other thing is just going to be comments without responses, just so that they can be on the record, okay? So I'm sorry, Susan, but that took so much time that I think we're going to take a couple of Zooms, and then you will get to say what you need to say on the record. Okay, so Varen Brownbat. You had a question about facial recognition in the Zoom. I might be saying your name wrong. I'm saying Varen, but it might be Varen. Okay.
Hi, my question is, how does an NYPD employee facial recognition software, and where do they collect the data from, and what are the sources? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Would you mind speaking a little bit more slowly? You said you have a question about facial recognition and could you...
And the data. He wants to know where the data goes or comes. Data.
How does NYPD use facial recognition software and how the data is collected? What are the sources?
Baron, we got it.
We got it. Thank you.
So thank you for the question. I'm Bob Barrows. I'm director in our department's legal bureau. So in terms of the use of technology by the NYPD, and particularly facial recognition, I think I would answer this by saying that I think anyone, if you asked anyone, they would use that they use more technology than they did 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And the police department isn't much different, right? We embrace technology. It's important that we evolve, but it's also important that it's used appropriately and that there are important safeguards. And our facial recognition policy is actually available to be seen online. Our patrol guide is available online, so you can take a look at it. But in terms of how we use facial recognition technology, I think there's some misunderstanding that, usually the scenario that's presented is that cops have special cameras that can just focus on an individual's face and tell you all sorts of identifying information about that person. And that's actually really not accurate, and it's not consistent with how we use facial recognition technology. How we use it is really to further investigations and make it precise. So if we have a photo or a video of a suspect in a robbery, for example, or an assault, or some other type of felony crime, and we don't have, for example, a witness that can identify that person, we may use facial recognition to take a look at that picture, and based on the technology, it can provide us leads to say that based on the facial features in this picture, it could be this person. And that photo is run against, that what we call a probe image is run against our arrestee photo database. So it gives us really a lead. It's not the basis to arrest someone. It's not the basis to get a search warrant. It's simply a lead that this may be the person in this still image that we have. The investigator in that case still has to have other corroborating evidence and build that case in order to make an arrest or get a search warrant.
Okay.
I just wanted to say too, not every officer, has access to facial recognition technology. There's a lot of safeguards that are in place. Investigators have to go through several levels of checks and balances, and it's housed within really one unit in the police department, our real-time crime center. So.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much. And so for this lightning round, because we only have a half an hour left, we're really going to ask you to be brief and concise in person and on Zoom. I'm going to go to Zoom for the next two, starting with Caillou Lee. Caillou Lee.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, so my question is pretty short. Can you elaborate on the Asian Hate Crime Task Force? Like, how does this task force work? Because it seems that this is more targeted towards a situation that a crime has already happened as is reported. But do you have any specific plans to help deter Asian hate crime, to avoid it from happening, and especially to protect the senior people? Thank you.
Thank you. Again, not every question is going to be answered tonight, but it will get answered. Back in Zoom, Rosa Chang. Rosa.
Hi, yes, hi, thank you. I was wondering, are there neighborhood housing programs that could encourage officers to live within the very communities that they serve so that they can be part of the community, and rather than having community partners or liaisons, you actually have police be part and members of the community? And sorry, I have a two-part question. And then the other question was, what is the plan to bring back the areas under the Brooklyn Bridge to public use? Because a private parking lot for the NYPD and DOT seems to be a criminal use of such a large swath of iconic public land.
All right, so those
Thank
are
you.
thank you, Rosa. Two questions. One, we've heard every night, so I think it is a burning issue for people, which is, can police officers come back into the neighborhoods or the communities that they police? And then also about the parking lot under the Brooklyn Bridge. Well, not parking lot, but what is being used as a police parking lot. What can that be public land again that public has access to? Thank you. In the room, Susan Setzer.
Thank you. I'm District Manager of Community Board 3, which is East Village, Lower East Side, Chinatown. And I've been doing this for many years, and I've worked with some amazing COs and community affairs officers. So I know what can be done and what we can accomplish. I feel like there's less collaboration right now. If there's less of this is a problem and this is the plan, this is what we're going to do. Instead, we often hear what can't be done, and I know it's very difficult for the police these days, but we need to be more solution-oriented. And I will say that I still work with excellent people in every precinct. The community is very frustrated about lack of enforcement. I just came from a Build-A-Block meeting tonight in which people have been complaining for many months about open drug dealing and open drug use. And there was discussion on how the police handle it, and it seems to be not a real plan that can be explained, and is clearly not successful. The other issue is total lack of quality of life enforcement with all the open streets in our community. And I have to bring up a bias incident that was really hurtful for the community. Officer Gonzalez resigned today. While that period of time, we had hordes of people when the bars were first opening up that were not social distancing, not wearing masks. And when either the community board or the residents called the police, they were told they wouldn't even come and tell people to move or go away. It was simply, we can't do anything. So that was Avenue A and B, 2 blocks away on Avenue D, and won't go into the, what happened. I went to the precinct with this problem, and I said there is a perception of bias. And the result I got was escalated. My cops aren't racist. I have to hang up now. That's not the way we deal with problems, and it is just important, very important.
No, thank you very much for sharing that experience and getting that on the record that, it's not okay, and the defensiveness is never going to lead to a solution, that you really have to collaborate with the community, and also recognizing or highlighting that this officer who was observed putting his knee on the neck of a young man of color for not wearing a mask in May, that others were not treated the same way. I don't know, Borough President, if you wanted to say anything.
No, I think that Susan has a long experience, but I do think that the drug dealing is challenging. And I would like to hear from NYPD, because it's a disease, it's not a crime, but it is a challenge in our neighborhoods. How are we dealing with drug dealing? This is hard.
Can somebody, yeah, thanks, Chief.
Are we speaking in respect to the opioid epidemic?
Yes.
So we realize that it is an illness, right? But if it's open in public, then the police are supposed to respond. Arrests are being made, but we also have diversion programs in place, such as HOPE. I know we have it in Brooklyn, we had it in Staten Island, so we're not criminalizing social conditions or social issues, I should say, or just a mere fact that someone has a substance abuse issue. But with that being said, you are not allowed to use drugs in public, even with the homeless condition, right? We shifted funds, the city has shifted funds, and listen, A lot of it I believe in, because I think for the most part, police have always been addressing everything. We are not the everything police because we are not the expert in everything, such as mental illness or person in crisis, right? Homeless. With that being said, other city agencies has been tasked with that. But still, anytime there's a safety issue or there's some sort of drug use, we are to respond and address that issue. And I'm quite sure Steve, as well as other borough commanders,
Just as part of the
realize
listening
that.
tour, these are tough issues, and they need more, more discussion to solve. But we should listen, but we also need a lot more discussion.
Agreed.
Thank you. All right. Yes, you
Just want
can.
to add on the drug.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to add with the drug. Generally, if you see something open in the street, please call 911. We do have open investigations that deal with violence with drugs. We just had in the Chelsea houses, we had a couple of past shootings last year. We just took a drug gang down out of Chelsea houses, and we're going to prosecute them federally. So we're trying to get precision policing to go after our people causing the violence. But likewise, the street, someone using drugs or a homeless person on the street, that's a call to 911, and we'll respond and handle that. Okay, I apologize. But I do get complaints. There was one article in the Post with somebody using drugs up on 32nd Street, and thank you.
All right. Thank you. Back to Zoom. Shahida Smith. Shahida Smith. Shahida Smith. Shahida. Okay.
I'm here. Hello.
All right. Wonderful.
Yes, wonderful. I'm just reading the comments, and we're traumatized. I mean, we're a city full of people who have issues that are very, very deep rooted. But I'm here mostly, other than being a woman of color, a Black woman of color in the Lower East Side, I'm here to just speak to how more youth can be involved other than the programming that the NYPD sponsors or funds, right? It's great to be an explorer, but how many young people who are court involved are explorers, right? How many young people who have been traumatized by the NYPD are explorers? And those are some questions that I have. I really think that it's important that we hear what they say and their experiences, because although you have some young people in your space right now, and I applaud them and I respect them, there are a lot of young people who will never even think to be a part of a conversation like this because they don't think that their voices are heard or recognized as something that is important, because that is the systematic racism that has placed them in the positions that they are or how they feel. The trauma that happens and occurs in the community are historical between the NYPD and people of color who live in these communities that are suffering. So my question is, in terms of extending your reach, has the NYPD been able to really connect with young people who have been affected by some of the officers who say ridiculous things? One of the young people who I deal with, she lives in Brooklyn, in Midwood, if I believe, and she's complained to an officer about the drug dealing that was happening across the street from her house. And she's a child that is in care, right? So she already has safety issues. She already has PTSD from whatever happened with her and her family. And the officers responded, that's why we need the mob. I think that the trainings that you have, they're excellent. It's great that you're training folks on implicit bias. It's great that you're training folks on trauma. It's great, right? But some of the comments in the chat, in the Zoom chat, were speaking to what levels of education do people need? Gotcha. And in my opinion, it's more about lived experience.
Right.
So the question is, aside from just the trainings, that the officers are receiving for 8 hours or 9 hours or 12 hours, how many hours that you all are proposing or they have already done. It's more about, and I've been in youth services for 25 years of my life. I've been in youth services before I was an adult. So to training, right?
Shahida, so
people go to training.
I think I got your question. I think you're saying that it's training, yes, and these outreach programs, yes, but what else are you doing to deal with the trauma and to reach the people in the community, young people and older people who have suffered and are in pain?
All right, thank you for the question. Please leave your information.
I didn't even get
I would like to reach out to you after this. I just want to say,
thank you.
All right, I appreciate the question. One of the things we're fortunate in Manhattan South, we have a nonprofit. We can't do it alone. So there's a nonprofit on 42nd Street. It's called the All-Star Project, and they have a theater, and it's a state-of-the-art theater, and they're looking for our young people to be brought in there. So they have a program called Cops and Kids, where we take 10 police officers from the precinct and 10 youth from there, and they put they put on stage. They have moderators, and they do role playing, and they get to know one-on-one interaction with the police officers. In addition to that, that's their first program. They have other programs where they teach people carpentry, how to build a stage. They have set design. They have clothing design. They have actors, actresses. They put on plays. It's a great program up there. Due to COVID, we kind of put on backhold, but we're going to get the youth officers. We're going to get 10 officers from each precinct, 10 from the community, and bring them over to the theater and get involved in this. So,
Chief, can I just get from the young people sort of the same question, their answer?
Sure.
Would that be possible? They don't want to talk. I'm making them talk.
So my name's Brian. So obviously you have to have trust in with the officer. So I guess what people are concerned about that is that kids may be shy and nervous to be like in front of an officer that they've never been with, I guess, or is their first time being in a program like this. So it's like, so I started last year, like in mid-January, and I didn't have a connection with the officers that I did right now. So it's like, at the beginning, it was like, I was nervous, like, I didn't know what to expect and to do. But it's like, once you get that bond and connection with them, it's like, okay, they're trying here to support you and succeed in life. So it's like, they want you to do better. So it's like, I feel that I've learned a lot from that, and I feel like I'll carry this through my ways, through my career that I want to achieve. So it's like, I've seen how hardworking they are, and especially they're giving up their time to youth. So it's like, I feel like I'm getting the support that I need, but also it's like, I have a bond with the officers, and I could actually talk to them, and like, they could also like support each other, like support other kids. So it's like, yeah.
I appreciate that.
Did any other of the youth want to comment on that? Alan.
This is going to be quick, but in regards to the Explore program, like he said, a lot of the kids in the program are actually a lot of troubled youth. They come from environments, they come from neighborhoods where they don't have the opportunity to have parental figures, to have different opportunities that other kids may have. The Explore program, it bridges that gap. It helps to give them a different community for people to outreach and speak with people who they never think that they would speak with. I've been in the program roughly a couple of years now. I'm an Explore chief. This helped me do a lot of things when it comes to networking, when it comes to finding out what I wanted to do for my career and how I wanted to be a first responder. And it helped me, one of my advisors back here, he's another father figure to me as well. I'm able to say things to him that I would not normally go and say to my father as well. So I feel like the Explore program is a very important program, and there could be a lot done to help fix the program to make it better, but I feel like it has contributed a lot to the youth in New York City as a whole.
Thank you.
And that's what we need. We need people from the community to mentor these young men and women that are out there. I think that's key. People that we deal with, we're able to identify a lot of kids, like missing persons report. How many times has somebody run away? We had this one child ran away 17 times in a year. Here's somebody I want to get into that program, with the All-Star Project. We have another, truancy. We look at truancy reports. We're able to identify kids. So we have tools that we can identify these kids. Domestic violence. How many kids are in situations where there's violence at home, with drug use at home? We could identify those kids, high children at risk, and those are the ones that we want to try to bring in. So there's ways for us to identify it, but we also need people from the community to help us and mentor these kids, as many of our officers do.
Thank you. Okay. 8:44. I think we can get in maybe 2 more comments from Zoom before we have to end, but we'll see. Cheryl Miller. Cheryl Miller on Zoom. Okay. Cheryl, last call. James Stephen Gonzalez on Zoom. James Stephen?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. I'll try to keep it quick. You know, we were talking about over the news with this whole defunding police, which I, think is a lot of crap to it. But when we talk about like less funding that the police department has and then being short on officers, I have a question about allocating personnel. I'm a former precinct community council president, so I'm very familiar with the personnel inside of a command. Why are there still so many officers taking the place of civilian jobs inside having nice cushy spots? For instance, every command has about 7 to 10 police officers, uniformed police officers, not civilians, doing jobs that civilians can be doing. For instance, a plant manager is someone who is responsible for the cleaning and the maintenance of a building. It doesn't have to be a police officer, the property officer, the R&P coordinator. If somebody getting paid $70,000 just to take care of scheduling when the police cars need to go in for service, doesn't need to be a police officer, arrest processing assistant. When we start looking at the numbers, let's say just 7 people at a precinct, okay,
Gotcha.
at $70,000 a salary. That's 500. Hold on, I still have 2 minutes. That's $525,000 a year. Times that by 77 precincts, that's $40,425,000. Okay, that doesn't even include the personnel inside one police plaza. So, Mr. Deputy Commissioner, what's being done about this? That's 583 police officers just in precincts alone. That is not even doing police work.
We have the question. I will get an answer for you. It's the issue that's been going on for many years of civilians doing jobs.
Yeah, I've been asking this for a couple weeks now.
Okay, but we got to get the answer for you.
So, this is Chief Holmes. Thank you for the question. With that being said, I know that we had a big push to hire many civilians to put more officers back out on patrol. The plat manager, I don't even know if that even still exists. I don't know how recent you've been in precincts, and maybe Steve can speak to that, but I can assure you we are so short on manpower that we definitely had a mad push for civilians. We hired a lot of civilians to perform those administrative positions. If you're talking about an arrest officer, naturally, you need an officer to handle prisoners. You're never going to put a civilian in that position, with the exception we use civilians to transport prisoners to court. But, and maybe Steve, correct me if I'm wrong. I know it. So I know years ago we had that. It's been a while since I've been in a precinct, but I was a borough commander a couple of years ago, and I can assure you, as much as we were short on manpower, those positions were eliminated a while ago.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for answering that question. Jada Santiago from Facebook wants to know about the New York City Police Reform Bill. Why wasn't the public briefed on the bill? And why weren't we told what would be included? It's unfair for city officials to make bills that the public isn't briefed on, so that we can provide comments. I think it was a statement about the New York City Police Reform Bill, but isn't that what this is?
That's exactly what this is, and I believe that all the materials and resources are posted on that site that I made mention of, nyc.gov, right, /NYPD/reforms. I think there's a detailed array of information concerning this particular forum, as far as timeline, scheduling, things of that nature.
And so just to be clear for everybody who's out there, if there's some confusion, this is the moment when your public input is being taken into account. There hasn't been a reform yet. That comes after these conversations and after the next set of conversations.
Right, this is phase one of community engagement. There are many other phases to come, and then you'll be able to view it because it'll be posted for public comment before there's any sort of ratification on it.
Thank you. Okay, Eileen Spinner in Zoom. Eileen? Okay.
Hello?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I wanted to ask a question about the militarization of our police. And I would really like to see a review of the effectiveness of the increased weaponry and riot gear when we were dealing with the demonstrators and protesters this past summer. That's it.
Thank you. That was succinct. I think we might be able to get a really succinct response. Yep. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, this talk about police departments accepting military equipment, it was a federal program. The NYPD does not have any military-grade equipment.
Oh, all right. That was easy, fast, quick. Thank you. Sorry, I was distracted trying to text Chris. So I'm going to just ask her instead of texting her. Chris, are you there? Can you give us a kind of a summary or of what's happened in Zoom?
Yes. I want to echo the fact that there's been so much engagement on Zoom with the speakers tonight and with really getting a bunch of different topics out there, and that this is the first platform to sort of solicit this type of engagement. And some topics that I just wanted to give time to that I saw in the chat and that people messaged me include further discovery of shortage of officers, more discussion about safety on the subway, talk about enforcement of car horns, motorbikes, car racing, as well as continue talk about training of NYPD and recruitment, and neurodiverse people, and especially people of color who are neurodiverse, treatment of them by NYPD to improve the relationship. And lastly, the thing that I want to just comment on from my perspective in Zoom is that there was an overarching theme that it seems that a lot of people were engaging with wanting transparency, with wanting to hear more from NYPD, with wanting to communicate more with NYPD, and that transparency was going to be the gateway to build the trust and to hopefully establish safety for a lot of the concerns that were put forth in the comments, is really looking for that open communication and transparency.
Thank you so much, Chris. I'm really glad that you highlighted all of those. Some of them are in my cards that I haven't been able to get to, so I appreciate you raising those voices. In the room, I want to give the borough president a chance to say some final remarks if you'd like to.
Well, I'm trying to get young people to talk. You know how I am. And there's a young woman back there. She won't talk.
All right.
Well, anyway, I know this is the beginning of the listening tour, and I think that what we're listening to is complicated in terms of the quality of life issues, issues of racial justice, and trying to figure out how all of these pieces fit together. And the third piece, as far as I'm concerned, is trying to get agencies to work together, because NYPD cannot be the solution. Some people think it is to everything. It cannot be. And I think as a city, we have to work and figure out that collaboration that makes sense for every single New Yorker as well as for the police force. Those are the three pieces, I think, that we're all trying to figure out. And thank you very much.
Thank you. So I know that we haven't had a chance to hear from everybody in the room, and since it's 8:53, I think we do have time for one more. That gentleman, since you're standing right there.
Thank you. One, I would just like to say thank you to everybody up on the panel there. You have a really hard job, and as of late, I think it's been much harder than it's ever been. So I run the hospital downtown, and I will tell you, we went from fully COVID within our beds And that transitioned at one point to police officers in our beds being hurt during these outbreaks. I loved hearing from the young folks here today, and the gentleman up there mentioned it being 50-50 and people coming together. I thought that was brilliant. So I just want to tell you, we have NYPD detail within our hospital, and it is a very diverse group of officers. There's probably more black and Spanish than there are white, female officers, and I think there is, at this point in time, a demoralization somewhat of the police force. You can see it, and I think as things come back together, and I think this is a great forum and listening and doing things better, but I think there also has to be a focus on the officers themselves that are on the ground of every color and ethnicity to make them feel proud of being an officer again, because I think that's challenged a little bit right now, and they are really good people, the ones that I meet. So I think when you bring this all back around that 50-50 statement, as you're making the community feel safer and better, I think you need to look at your beat officers as well and make sure they're okay, because a lot of them were hurt during this.
Thank you. And I think that goes to some of the comments that Chris highlighted that were happening in the Zoom, right? How are we supporting officers? How are we helping them, deal with the turmoil and mental stress? Like, what kind of supports are in there for them? And also community building. This kind of listening process for the public, maybe something like this needs to happen internally too, right? So that officers get a chance to share what, they need. Also, a couple of nights ago, somebody mentioned the idea of like mentoring going both directions, right? Like some of the young people who are coming into the department also sharing new ideas, and that exuberance and excitement about being officers with the people who have been here longer. So thank you all for being here tonight. I think that is it for me, and I want to make sure that we close out with some comments from the Commissioner.
So this is the second for me. I did the second night and then tonight, the conversation is always robust, and tonight I was especially pleased because of all the young people we have here. And you noticed a lot of the conversation was about young people and engagement and the relationship with police. This is something that's been around. I've been in the business 50 years, and before I grew up in Brooklyn, and I had the same challenges with the police back then that you have now in some respects. But opportunities, not all the police were the same, and there were opportunities to engage with some officers where, in other cases, not so much. At least it wasn't a positive interaction. In any case, my job this evening is to close this out with just a few remarks. This is the final, as Chief Holmes mentioned earlier, this is the 8th of the 8 listening sessions. I thought that this one, for the people in the room and certainly for the people on Zoom and Facebook, the comments were superb. They were candid and they were honest. And, if I looked at the high line, big picture, we heard words like trauma and trust and collaboration and transparency. All of those things sort of came through. As well as themes around, again, young people, bias in policing, the kinds of things that we struggle with from time to time, de-escalation, the whole notion of how we keep the temperature down as opposed to escalating, and that speaks to training. Training came up several times. Some conflicts and concerns around the relationship between civilian oversight, in particular CCRB, and the NYPD, specifically around body-worn cameras. Actually, on that one, we actually are in sync with them and making arrangements for special space so that they can view the videos according to what we can do lawfully and provide to them. We spoke about masks and the idea, the notion of, in my mind, police officers having respect for the uniform, wearing the mask, and respect for themselves and respect for members of the public. Certainly, protest was paramount also and pretty prominent in the discussion, and lots of issues there, and ongoing discussion. You heard that we've been introspective in the department as it relates to that. These, as the chief mentioned earlier in her remarks, protests this time were very different in some respects, much more violent than we had seen in the past for a variety of reasons, and directed at police in particular. So these listening sessions are designed ultimately, and this is not the end. This is the first phase in the process of this process of reinvention and reform and collaboration. So we will be continuing this in a different way with conversations with other organizations, as was mentioned earlier, as well as we go forward to phase 2 in this process. So I'll leave it there, and thank you all for the folks in the room for your candor, especially you young people. I appreciate what you had to say. We are listening, and we heard loud and clear. And to the folks online, thank you for your interest, certainly, and your questions. And rest assured that we heard that loud and clear as well. So we look forward to continuing this exercise as we get into phase 2. Thanks very much, everyone.